I love to look at metals, just because metals are one of those great, wonderfully mythologic figures in our modern expressions. And oddly enough, they are mythologic expressions in our ancient expressions as well. So, I mean, metals play a fun role in answering this question. If you look at the wonderful success, the best success of the 1849 gold rush, you would probably be surprised to know that the all-in industrial greatest value of the gold rush actually had nothing and everything to do with gold. Okay? Now, we tell ourselves the myth that 1849, that's how California got to be California, it's how Stanford got to be Stanford, it's how all of these great things, Union Pacific and Central Pacific and all these great industrial giants, because of gold. But if you actually go back and look at the history, okay, and when I talk about the wisdom of the ancients, I'm not talking about nostalgia. I'm actually talking about the wisdom of the ancients. Okay? If you go back and look at some of the greatest successes of the 1849 economic impulse around metals, what you find is an interesting story of a company called the Kennecott Mining Company, a gold mine speculator. And you know today, made none of his wealth in gold. It's the largest copper mine. But ask yourself in 1849, 1850, 1851, 1852, how on earth could copper become a bigger success than gold? Because it really did, by the way. Kennecott's success far eclipses the prospectors of California. Far eclipses the prospectors of California. Why? Very simple reason. When you build the Transcontinental Railroad, you have a thing called the Morrill Act, and the Morrill Act is the legal framework that established a way to give land grants to the railroads based on how many linear feet of track that they laid. And oddly enough, the West Coast came up with a very advanced formula, which is saying, hey, hold on a second, if you're laying track across Kansas and you have virtually no grade, you can lay miles a day. But if you're laying track across the Sierra Nevadas, you know, if you get an inch laid in a day, sometimes that's a really good day. If you don't have 10,000 workers working for months hoping to get the next pass covered, you're lucky. And the Morrill Act was revised, by the way, after it was first issued, where it was a very simple formula. Lay X track, you get X land around the track. To a very interesting calculation where all of a sudden the grade of the slope and the complexity of the passes through which you were going entered into the formula. The brilliance of the West Coast was actually to understand how to manipulate Congress into seeing the value of the intangible, which was the value of effort. So the birth of the West Coast kind of entrepreneurial notion of value was actually an innovation created by mountains. It was the ability to argue public policy that says effort, not the phenotypic expression, but effort needed to be valued. Okay, so there's a framework that comes out of the wisdom of the ancients. Now, let's look at what happened with Kennecott, because that's part of this story. Kennecott actually benefited from copper for a very simple infrastructure innovation, and that was a thing called the transcontinental telegraph. You didn't need drawn copper before that, but you need a lot of drawn copper with the transcontinental telegraph. You wouldn't have had the impulse for a transcontinental telegraph if you didn't want to do what?
Commerce.
Not commerce, banking. The first wire transfers are the reason why we really had the transcontinental rail and the transcontinental telegraph. So once again, where's the wisdom? Well, the wisdom is understanding the what went into it part of the story. Not getting nostalgic about these phenotypic moments in time, not going back to a wouldn't it be nice if we were in the 1860s and 1870s? Wouldn't it be nice if we could find a way to take the veterans of the Civil War and give them employment in the rail industry? I mean, all those nostalgic kind of wouldn't it be nice stories isn't what I refer to when I talk about the wisdom of the ancients. What I'm talking about is the ability to understand that it was the ability for people to engage in value creation where they freed themselves from the then perception of what value was. Kennecott seeing copper, but not seeing copper, seeing transcontinental telegraph. Value in banking, not in gold, but the ability to wire transfer a confirmation of gold in the Bank of San Francisco to the banks in New York. That was actually where the value was created. The value was not created in the 1849 gold rush. The value was not created in the mining of copper. The value was created in associating that which was tangible in a context. And that context was based on the creative impulses of the environment in that present now.